It surrounds us. It's everywhere. Tonight, you will hear from the people who live and work within these highly active locations, all in the efforts to discover America's most haunted. Most haunted. With your host, ghost hunter and author, Dan Terry.
Well, good evening, guys and ghouls. I am Dan Terry, your ghost host with the most haunted. And Halloween is coming, right around the corner here. So we're going to have to get back into some ghost stories. And I have got a really cool guest for you, another author. And she's been around top notch. She's wrote a book about Athens, Georgia. It's called Ghosts of Athens. And you guys know I wrote the one about a little town of Washington, Missouri, which filled up a book. Herman has now filled up 2 books. Some of these little towns are just crazy, insanely haunted, and nobody knows it. The people living there know it. Their friends know it, but it never gets out. So this young lady has wrote about Athens. She wrote a second book called Ghost of Athens and Beyond, which takes North Georgia, and she's coming out with one very shortly called The Ghosts of Asheville. So we're going to have to talk about North Carolina. So let's bring up Tracy Adkins. Hi there.
Hello.
Tracy, what got you started on this? You were a technical writer, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that's correct. And that did serve me well when I started writing these books. But even back as far as when I was in college, I had some weird experiences that I couldn't explain. And so I found myself reading a lot of books about other people that had experiences that they couldn't explain. And so, I collected up all of these books, and Athens didn't have a book like that. And I didn't know why. I'd lived there a long time. I knew that Athens had stories, and I actually waited like several years for somebody to write this book, and nobody wrote it. So I thought, well, I'm a writer, I'm just going to have to do it myself. So I just jumped in and did it.
That's quite a leap from technical manuals, which I can't even imagine how to write technical manuals, to talking about haunted places. Those are practically little novels, true stories, but there's a background, there's what's going on, how it ends. How did you make that kind of a change?
Well, I was also fortunate that I've been writing since I was extremely young. I wrote a lot of fiction and short stories and poetry and different things. So I had a lot of previous writing experience to draw on in addition to the technical writing. The technical writing helped a lot with, making what I composed be very polished.
Okay.
And to help me be organized about, how I approached it and how I went through the process. So all of it was very helpful.
17 years as a technical writer, I just couldn't even imagine suddenly switching to telling stories that you were not there for. You couldn't even verify it, really. And you just went on your first real ghost hunt recently. How was it?
It was scary. I was surprised. Usually if I'm in these locations doing interviews or, research and things like that, I don't usually have an experience there, or I'm not scared and that kind of thing. But on this particular one, this is at the Eagle Tavern in Watkinsville, Georgia. And I had been in the basement of the Eagle Tavern several times and not kind of felt anything, even though I had heard stories from a number of people that had experiences in the basement there. But on this particular time, when I went in that basement, I felt it immediately. It was just being terrified and wanting to get out. I'd never had that reaction before. I'd only heard about other people having it. So I didn't really enjoy it.
And in your research, what kind of spirit do you think is in that tavern basement?
Well, there's actually stories about an African-American man who they refer to as Henry, who was hung at the courthouse across the street from the tavern. And they said that his skeleton was in that basement for a lot of years. And so
Mhm.
whenever, people see a man in the windows upstairs, um, people always attribute activity in the house like that to Henry. And so
Okay.
when we did this investigation, we had the paranormal team. I went through and we actually had a psychic, Pam Coronado, and when she went in the basement, she didn't really know that story, and she was talking about, I see a man, his body, he's drug over here and thrown in the basement, and that led some credence to that actually being Henry down there.
Yeah. Yeah, when I started this, I didn't believe in psychics at all, and it didn't take a few years, and some are very good friends of mine that really, I used to say if they hit 45%, we're doing good, but they have hit some wild, crazy coincidences, I guess.
Yeah.
So it can't be a coincidence when she is picking out something that way.
Yeah, yeah. I think most. I'm going to go ahead and say most people that claim to be psychic are not.
Yeah.
But there are
Yeah.
some people that do have a true talent, and Pam Coronado is one of them.
Wow. Well, tell me about the first book. That's Ghosts of Athens. And is this place in it?
It is. I
Okay.
think it's the last chapter, but there's a large chapter on Eagle Tavern. And the way that I wrote these books, each chapter is about one place, and then the first part is the history of that place.
Mhm.
And I would work with like the university archivists and different people and do research to get the background on these locations and give as thorough a history as I can. And then the second part is where I interviewed people that live and work there, and they tell me their creepy stories about things that happened to them there.
What kind of stories did you get from these folks?
Well, the Eagle Tavern was pretty amazing because it's a historic site that's owned by the county. There's a lot of volunteers
Mhm.
and some government employees that are there regularly. Like if they'll have events there or do reenactments and different things. There was one person that was there for a reenactment, and when he walked into the tavern, he saw a woman in like a full, antebellum dress and, just looked like a regular person standing there. And he was startled to see her because he had just turned the alarm system off, and there wasn't supposed to be anyone in there. And as soon as he said hello, she disappeared right in front of him. And then a number of people have had experiences in that basement. Like I said, there was a different investigative team that was in that basement, and they saw some really creepy things, mists and shapes. And one person was actually attacked and ended up going to the hospital. And it is a scary basement. I mean, I would always say before, my experience being frightened there, that it was a scary place, but it truly is one of the most frightening places that I've put in any of my books, I think.
Is this still an active tavern or a museum? What is it
It is a
now?
house museum now, yes.
Okay. All right. And I have yet to find someone getting hurt on a ghost hunt other than falling down the steps or getting scared and tripping over something. How did this person get hurt?
Yeah, it's a phenomenal story. One of the paranormal team investigators went into that basement, and this was, a number of years back, and he was carrying one of the old plastic disposable cameras, right?
Mhm.
Because to take pictures while they were down there. And while they were in there, there were two or three people in there with him, and they heard a noise, and that man cried out, and he was like, "Get out, get out!" And so they went outside of the basement, and something had grabbed his hand, and it had grabbed it so hard it broke the plastic camera and broke his hand. And one of the other women that was in there with him was a nurse, an ER nurse, and she looked at it. She's like, "You've got to go to the hospital with this." And so,
Yeah.
you had to get out of there. So that, I mean, that's a lot of strength to be able to do that.
That is amazing. Now I got to get down there to see this ghost this tough. Yeah, I've been in some pretty nasty places and places with some pretty heavy, mean, vicious spirits, but to be able to break a man's hand, that is incredible.
Yeah, I think if that's Henry down there, I think he's mad about what happened to him at the end of his life. I think he's, just mad about his situation. I
Mhm.
don't know. There's a lot of anger down there, and clearly, it can impact the people that come into his space and when he's not happy about it. So
I cannot help but wonder if this man resembled someone from the lynch mob or whatever happened, or there that is a lot of strength for a spirit to come up with. Just
yeah, I've never heard of anything else like that.
the amount of emotion that had to be going through the spirit is just phenomenal to even come close to something like this.
Right.
That is really incredible.
Yeah, and additionally, when I was down there and when I had that reaction of feeling scared, one of the other investigators down there with me had put, I believe it was a spirit box up on a
Mhm.
shelf, and
Okay.
that thing just went flying across the basement. So, I mean, even just to do something simple like that,
Mhm.
is something that you hear more commonly. That
Yes.
that takes a lot of strength too, but that doesn't compare. Fortunately, when I was down there, nobody had bones broken or anything. But it's an angry spirit, yeah, with a lot of energy.
Well, I can see why that would be scary for your first ghost hunt, obviously.
Right, right.
What happened with the man who got his hand crushed? Did he ever go back? Did he give up ghost hunting? I've had people do that too.
I'm not sure. I was not able to talk to that man, but I did talk to two other people. I talked to another woman who was down there at the time, and then many years later, I had
Mhm.
a booth where I was selling my books, and a woman came up and she started talking about this experience that she had down at the basement of the Eagle Tavern, and I realized she was the nurse. I said, "Oh, you're the nurse that was down there, when this event happened." And she said, "Yeah, that was me." So I've talked to, two other people that were there.
There are such conflicting emotions when someone comes, you're selling the book, and they got better stories than what you had in the book.
Oh,
In
I
this
love
case, you got it covered, but
Yeah, I love it. And I just love hearing people's stories. I mean, that's what started all of this out for me was
Mhm.
I want to know about other people's experiences. So when people come up and say, "Oh, I had, this weird experience," I like to hear about it.
Well, you said you had an experience or two of your own. Can you share that with us?
Sure. So one of the earliest experiences that I had was in a movie theater that I worked at when I was in college, and this was in LJ, Georgia. This was prior to my moving to Athens, Georgia. And so weird stuff was happening at this theater, and everybody that worked at the theater and the owner kind of knew that stuff was going on. We talked about it some, but everybody, kind of had a story about an experience that had happened to them there.
Mhm.
I witnessed a lot of weird things, like uh, a lot of it happened late in the evening, like when we were cleaning up before we'd close and get out of there. So like if you finish cleaning an area and you turn all the lights off and then go away, and it'd be like only you or you and one other person, and
Mhm.
then you'd come back to that area and no one had been over there, but the lights had turned back on. In particular, this one bathroom, I don't know why this one bathroom would always have weird stuff. That light would turn itself back on. That
Mhm.
door would kind of slam or open and close and behave in ways that it shouldn't have been doing. But the craziest thing that happened there was it was myself and a manager, and we were in one of the auditoriums and we were cleaning up and we were like sweeping down, in the aisles and stuff.
Mhm.
And back in the day, and in some theaters now, they would have these big, heavy curtains on the sides of the walls, and they weigh about 1,000,000 pounds. They're just super heavy curtains that kind of cover the concrete wall. And as we were sweeping, that curtain lifted up off the wall and went up to the ceiling and just stayed there a second and then kind of floated back down. And I mean, that takes a lot of energy too. And at the time I didn't know, that was just one of my first experiences with something I couldn't explain.
Mhm.
But the manager, he turned to me and he said, "Did you see that?" I said, "Of course I saw it. How can you miss it? It was crazy."
So the manager, had he seen this kind of thing before, or was this something new for him?
He had seen like the lights, turning off and coming on, and he knew that weird stuff was going on, but he had never seen anything like that. I mean,
Okay.
that was pretty breathtaking. And then later, probably after that event, and everybody, you know, was becoming affected by it. And it was after we had cleaned up and we were about to all of us leave, and it was myself and one other employee and the manager and the owner, and we were back in this little room back by the concession stand, and we were talking about the things that had been going on, and all of a sudden we heard this weird noise, and it was like bang, 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 bang. And so we, went to look, and that the bathroom that's weird, that door was slamming. Bam, 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 bam. And we all watched it for a second, and we're like, okay, we're getting out of here now. And after you have an experience, multiple experiences like that, you have to wonder what are the mechanics of this? What's going on with this?
Have you ever figured out who was haunting that area?
I have no idea because, at the time, that was probably 1990, and that was, the new fancy theater. And so, it wasn't like it was a decrepit old historic theater or something. It was new, and, so maybe there was something going on with the land, or, it's so hard to say because so many people, everybody in town came through there. So who knows?
Well, and where was that at again?
In Illijay, Georgia.
Okay, we'll have to check that out. How any stories from Americus and the battlefield or the old Confederate prison?
I don't. I don't have as many stories from that whole region.
Okay.
Most of the ones that I've been exposed to have been from Athens and North Georgia. The second book is about the North Georgia area. And then in Asheville, I did live in Asheville for a couple of years and then ended up moving back to Athens. But while I was there, I was exposed to a lot of the ghost stories and haunted locations there. And I thought, there's definitely a book here too.
Well, we'll have to save that one for the end of the show though, because that's getting close to my area.
Okay.
So North Georgia, what does that encompass? What areas?
So that is, Athens is kind of on the border of between northern Georgia and middle Georgia, I would say.
Okay.
But up going more north towards the Appalachian Mountains, so like Blue Ridge, Georgia, Illijay, Georgia, Dahlonega, Georgia, those kinds of areas. A lot of these, little mountain towns. There's a lot of history there. One theme that I found with a lot of the locations in the second book was when Cherokee and other Native American tribes were displaced from these places. I mean, that's definitely, it's a common theme, not just because it happened everywhere, in that area, but
Sure.
I think it also played into the trauma of what got recorded in these locations that continue to affect people to this day.
Did you come across any stories of the before times when the Moon-eyed people and the giants allegedly stayed in those mountains and fought the Cherokee?
No, I've only heard the tiniest bits of some of those stories, but it's something that I'm not familiar with as much.
Okay. Now that's a particular interest of mine now because I'm living in these mountains also.
Right.
And there's a lot of stories about these Moon-eyed people, and I'm just working on figuring that one out. Problem is it blends into the giants from all over the country. And whether or not they were tall, white with beards, or short, white with beards, there's so many legends, it's hard to figure it out. So
right.
I may need your more technical guidance on that one sometime.
Okay.
Well, what other stories do you get from the North Georgia area?
Let's see. There is a house. I'm going to have to refer back to make sure I get the name of the house right. The Chastain Brawley House. So that is a historic house in Fannin County, Georgia, which is where I went to high school. And that house has had a number of sightings and experiences. It's owned by a local judge, and sometimes he will allow investigative teams to go up there. And the house is in kind of bad shape. He was starting to restore it, but he had a hard time keeping crews on site because tools would disappear and they would have weird experiences and leave, and no one wanted to work on it. But yeah, there was one of the people that built the house. In that family, there was a little girl that died at a young age, and she's buried up on the hill behind the house. And so a lot of people that are investigating there or just visiting on the property will see an image of a little girl, or when they're upstairs in the structure, they'll hear a little girl. And so they believe that it's probably, the little girl that died tragically at a young age.
Do you think that's what's scaring off the workers? I mean, that seems pretty mild to me.
Yeah, I don't know that it's her. Another investigative group that went there, they heard really loud screaming that just almost shook the whole house, and seemed like a really terrifying experience. So I think that there's something there, in addition to this young girl, but I'm not sure. I couldn't tell from the stories that I got, what it is exactly that's responsible for that.
Okay. And are you excited about trying to get there and ghost hunt it yourself now?
Probably not. I mean, I honestly, I was so scared at Eagle Tavern. I would be very deliberative before I went anywhere on site to investigate again.
Well, anytime you say there's a place that people run out of, I want to go. Yeah, we've got to try that. Okay. So you got the you say Chastain?
Yeah, Chastain Brawley.
And I think I've read about that before in some of the books about
really?
Ghosts of the South. That sounds familiar to me. But you've got a little girl there who is, and maybe more spirits. Somebody's scaring off hardworking men and hiding their tools from them, which we've both heard before, that kind of a story. Anything else from that area?
There is another story that I really like. This is the Callaway Plantation, which is in Wilkes County.
Okay.
Which is a little further south. It's probably an hour from Athens, I would say. But I interviewed a woman who worked there. This is a historic house museum now as well. And she was talking about how one of her duties working at the house museum is when she gets there in the morning, that her job is to take these flags that they have outside and put, the flags out on display. And so one morning she went, and she was, there were several of these flags, so it took her a little bit to do it. And as she was doing it, a man wandered up and was, talking to her about the house and saying that he was glad that she was there, to take care of things, and that he appreciated that, and just kind of chatting. And she was kind of, putting the flags out as they were talking. And then at one point she went to get a flag, and when she came back, the fellow wasn't there anymore. And then it occurred to her that it was kind of weird that he was there that early, and she hadn't really, noticed a car pulling in or anything. And so she looked around, and she looked around for him, or she looked around for a car, and, looked around for, any sign of, who he was or where he went. She couldn't find anything at all. And so that's a pretty that's a pretty creepy one.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean, it's not common for me to talk to people that have a full-fledged conversation. I mean, it's not unheard of, but it's definitely uncommon.
Wow. Yeah, that's the kind of ghost stories we love. All right, Tracy, let me just take a quick break away from me. You go ahead and get some coffee or whatever, and we're going to talk about a few other little details, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Okay.
It's almost here, ladies and gentlemen. The UNX Network Year 2 anniversary at XCon 2023. XCon is being held this year from October the 30th to November 1st at the beautiful Oasis Hotel and Conference Center in Springfield, Missouri. Top speakers include host of America Unearthed, Scott Walter, plus Haley Ramsey, Sev Talk, UNX's very own Maureen Richmond and Dan Terry, Mindy Toutfest, Harriet McFeely, Forrest Crawford, and many more. And they're all coming to deliver new information on topics like UFOs, alien encounters, cryptids and ancient secrets, and real hauntings from the afterlife. Join us for the film premiere of A Haunting in Blue Hill. And don't miss the Mad Hatter Paranormal Halloween Bash, Banquet, and Costume Contest on All Hallows Eve, October 31st. So join us as we close out the 2023 conference season. Info and tickets are available now at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com, and we'll see you there.
Friends, if you have not gotten tickets for the XCon yet, you are really missing out. And we'll talk more about that here at the end, but we want to get right back to Tracy and stories of Georgia and Asheville, North Carolina. Tracy, are you still with us? There you are. Okay. Thought I'd lost you for a minute.
No, I'm here.
All right. Okay. So you got the house with the lady who was, I don't want to say stalked. It was apparently a very polite conversation, but had a ghost wanting to pass the time of day. I guess death gets lonely for these folks, huh?
Maybe it does. It's hard to say what's going on with them. I don't think it's one thing for all spirits. I think some spirits have one agenda and some have no agenda, or there's a lot of different things that can be going on. But the impression that the woman got that this happened to was that this was someone from the house's history that was happy with the way that the house was being taken care of and run, and took the time and energy to make that known. So I thought that was fascinating.
Did she comment on the style of clothes or anything that would give us an idea of the time period?
Yeah, she did say that he was dressed in kind of an older style of clothing, and maybe that, he was either someone from the family or someone that worked the land there. Yeah, she said, upon reflection, that it wasn't just the average person that they get coming through the door there.
Okay. That's pretty cool. So you lived in Asheville for a while.
I did.
Did you deal with any spirits, or what made you come to the conclusion this place is really haunted?
I didn't start out by having experiences there, but there's some really good ghost tours in Asheville, and I always enjoyed doing those. So, I took a few ghost tours and heard about some of the places in town that were haunted. And so, by this time, my first book was out. And so I had, some experience of how to go about it. And so I started reaching out to some of the places that I heard stories about, and trying to set up interviews with people that lived and worked in some of these locations. And I had a little bit of a different process than I did with the first book, because I found that, when I did the Athens book, people were super eager to share their stories and point me in new directions and say, oh, you should talk to so-and-so, you should check out this other place. And, it just kind of built on itself as I went along. Mm-hmm. But in Asheville, people were a lot more, kept things closer to the vest. And some people said, yes, I have stories, but I don't want to, talk about it. Or, people just didn't want to participate. So it was kind of a more difficult process. But I did end up getting some great stories. But it was definitely a learning curve when I did it there.
One of the first towns I went to is a very German community. And many of these people are third generation Americans, but they are really deep into their German culture. They wouldn't talk at all. I mean, you could not, they'd look at you like you were crazy. One place opened up, let me investigate it, and I wrote about it, and suddenly the whole town's opening. It's
Oh,
like,
wow.
okay, if she trusts you, then you're okay. Come here, sit down. I'll tell you what's going on. So, and I ended up with, like you, 2 books worth of information out of
Oh,
that
wow.
one little town, because once they let me in, you couldn't stop it.
Yeah, that's
But
great.
maybe you need to get into with a ghost hunting team in Asheville and get them to help you get through and get some.
Well, one thing that was interesting, I was not able to get the Biltmore House into the Asheville book. I had,
Really?
it's, I knew that, officially that the employees of Biltmore are not supposed to talk about it. But I just had trouble getting an in to get an interview. And so, if I don't have the first person interviews, then, I don't really want to put it in the book because that's just what I prefer to
Oh yeah, it's just
do.
rumor. Yeah.
Right. And so I had to leave it out. But then I got a contact just less than a week ago. It's someone who was working on a film that was shooting there, and he was willing to talk to me about some weird stuff that he saw and experienced there. So that'll go in the next book, but I unfortunately couldn't get it in the Asheville book.
And when will the Asheville book be available?
It will be available on, I think it's Tuesday the 26th, so in about a week and a half.
Oh, outstanding. And how can people get hold of it?
It will be available on Amazon, and you can also go to tracyadkins.com, and there's links there where you can get all of my books.
Okay. Well, you got to tell us some stories about Asheville then, since the book's coming out. Let's get this advertised good.
All right. So the first chapter in the book is about the Omni Grove Park Inn, and Grove Park Inn is a fascinating and beautiful historic hotel that is in Asheville.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just got so much history to it. Back in the earliest days of when Asheville was, first being built up as a town, Grove Park Inn, Edwin Wiley Grove was building this hotel out on what was the outer reaches of the north side of town at the time. Now it's like 2 miles from downtown, so it seems pretty central. But it's a big, just a huge, and it's all stone, and I think it's like a slate tile roof. It's gorgeous, and it looks very historic, and in a way, it looks a little creepy to me. But it's also beautiful, and it has just a ton of stories. I talked to a lot of employees that work there. At the time, most of the interviews I did were a few years ago now, and employees that had worked there prior to. So this was stories from employees going back quite a number of years, and they would see different things themselves, like people who, either something that was just a mist or a person that would kind of disappear. And they would also get a lot of reports from guests who stay there. There's a famous ghost on site called the Pink Lady, and there's a lot of different rumors about who she was and how she died and why she is still there. But it is true that the room that she stayed in on site, people that stay in that room will report weird experiences, especially children. Children will, tell their parents that, oh, this woman was here, or sometimes the parents will see a person near the children, and this is never like a scary thing. It's always, it's kind of a positive experience. But yeah, the Pink Lady makes a lot of appearances, and then the employees will, hear different things from the guests when they're leaving or just while they're staying on site.
And how many stories do you have in the Ghosts of Asheville?
I don't have a count. I've got 10 chapters.
Okay.
So it's 10 locations. One of those chapters is West Asheville, and that's actually kind of a big chapter.
Mhm.
And it covers several locations in West Asheville. West Asheville has an interesting history of going back and forth between being part of Asheville and then not being a separate city, and then going back to being part of Asheville. And but it's always, maintained something of a connection to Asheville.
Mhm.
And it has kind of its own unique vibe even to today, and it has a lot of interesting stories of some of the historic houses and business structures that are in that side of town.
So West Asheville is, even though part of Asheville, it's kind of a different community, kind of like the French Quarter.
Absolutely,
Wow.
exactly. Yeah, it's a really neat place. Um, And the main street going through West Asheville is Haywood Road. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of the center, the heart of West Asheville. And I'm fortunate enough that my family owns a property that's on Haywood Street in West Asheville. And so I get to, spend a good amount of time uh, enjoying all that it has to offer now, and just kind of enjoying all of the history and things that go on there. It's a neat place. If you're going to visit Asheville, you should definitely, take some time to check out West Asheville.
Different vibe than to the other part.
Absolutely, yeah.
Older, more antique looking, more historical.
It's just kind of different because, Asheville, especially downtown Asheville, is extremely historic, and it has, a fun, positive vibe and a lot of unique history too.
Mhm.
And the book goes into some of that. There's a building called Battery Park Hotel that is now condominiums. And that's down there, and it has a lot of ghost stories and interesting history, all on its own. But yeah, West Asheville. Um, I, I hate to use the word hipster. It's just kind of more of a hippie or hipster,
Okay.
kind of just a different attitude.
We'll have to check that out if we get down there then. S-
Yeah.
Uh, the Battery Park Hotel. A battery park usually means there was a military installation there. What kind of spirits do they have at that place then?
That's an interesting one. Yeah, so they named it Battery Park Hotel because there were actually two Battery Park hotels. There was one that was built, yeah, earlier, I want to say mid 1800s, that
Mhm.
was just a wooden structure. And It was a big part of the town for a long time, and then it was torn down and almost in the same place, but not exactly. A little further down, they built this new, more modern structure, and also called it Battery Park Hotel. And that was, I'd say, late 1800s, and that was supposed to be the new modern marvel for Asheville. And it has quite an interesting history as well. But there was a well documented murder that took place there. A young woman, unfortunately, she was there. I think she was visiting an uncle, and was killed in the hotel. And there's a lot of confusion about what actually happened. There was an employee that worked there, an African American gentleman, who was blamed for it. Um, but there was just a lot of controversy about um, what went on there. And so whenever people have experiences, in the building, they're not sure. Is it the girl that got murdered, or is it this man who was unjustly accused, or, is it, the real murderer? I mean, there's a lot of question marks there, but people do have interesting experiences. I talked to one woman who lives there now, and she would have uh, weird experiences in an area where there was a trash chute, and her dog would refuse to go in there. And then the dog would also be weird in the elevator. It would not want to get on the elevator, and it would look up and stare in one of the upper corners. And it would
Mhm.
do this every time she tried to get on the elevator. And sometimes animals, they know what's up before we do.
Oh, by far, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds like a really incredible place. How about Savannah? Have you gotten down to there yet? Seems like it'd be right up your alley.
It is. I love to visit and I love to partake of all the ghost, industry that's going on down there.
Yeah.
But I feel like maybe the bases are covered pretty well for Savannah. I wouldn't
Mhm.
rule it out, but I haven't delved in there as far as trying to get a book for that
Okay.
location.
No, I can understand that. It looks like you're full enough with North Georgia and Asheville. So, what's your plans for the next book, or do you have any yet?
Well, I do. I'm actually, I'm fortunate to be in a state where people come to me with their stories now, and so
Yes.
I have been getting some new stories, and it's kind of for a wider area. Some are from Tennessee, and like I said, I just got that story about Biltmore and different things, and so I'm still, I just did an interview like 2 days ago, and so I'm still, getting interviews and
Mhm.
I was thinking, oh, I've collected up the interviews, I've got to start drafting on this thing at some point. But I expect it won't come out for probably another 2 years.
Well, give me your favorite story before we go out. Which one of the books has your best story?
Well, one that comes to mind is about a hotel in downtown Athens,
Okay.
and it's called Graduate Hotel now. It's been called a couple of things through the years, and it is built from the buildings from an old foundry from the 1700s, and just pound for pound, the Graduate Hotel is the most haunted place in Athens. There's just a ton of stories, and we've done. My friend Jeff Clark, who does ghost tours here in town, we've done tours that are only on the hotel site. We just go around the hotel property and talk about all the weird stuff in different locations on site because it's a
Wow.
pretty big property. It's a big
Yeah.
hotel, and then it's also got like a separate restaurant and music venue, and all of this stuff is in historic buildings and some of the old,
Mhm.
foundry brick buildings. So it's pretty large. But the story, to get back to the story that I really like, um, the hotel staff told me that there was one room where they kept having at the switchboard, they would get uh, calls lighting up like they were coming from that room, and they would pick up and either it'd be static or it wouldn't be anything, and it was just happening all the time, and they were getting really annoyed by it, so they just took the phone. This was the old landline phones. Just took the phone out of the room. So problem solved, right? No, they still continued at the switchboard to get calls lighting up coming from that room, even though there wasn't even a phone in there anymore. So that one I think is just a lot of fun. It's not really scary. It's just super weird and something that happened over and over to a number of people. So I think that's a fun one.
No, I think that's pretty awesome. So you've got The Ghost of Asheville coming out in another week or two.
Yes.
And would you give us again where will we be able to pick that up at?
At Amazon.com or TracyAdkins.com.
And The Ghost of Athens was your first ghost book.
Yes.
And how long has that been out now?
That came out in 2016, fall of 2016.
Okay. What is that gravestone? That's
Isn't that
intriguing.
creepy? Oh, I love that picture. It's so funny. I took that picture in Oconee Hill Cemetery, which is here in Athens. It's kind of down behind the football stadium. It's a really beautiful cemetery. If you're one of those people like me who loves to go visit cemeteries, this is an excellent
Always.
one to go visit. And I was I was doing some photography in the cemetery, and I came across this statue, and as I was taking the picture, it just really, I don't know if it was the energy of it, but I just felt like something was looking back at me from it. And when I was taking the pictures, I couldn't believe they were capturing, what I was seeing. And so
Mhm.
I always loved that picture. And that was a number of years before I wrote the book. So when I did write the book, I thought, oh, I know what's going on the cover.
The eyes of that statue almost look alive.
Yeah, it was a really surreal experience.
But you wasn't creeped out over that.
It was a little creepy. It was a little creepy.
And Ghosts of Athens and Beyond, how long has that been out?
That came out last fall, yeah, October 22.
Now that tells me this was a grave of a child. Would that be a good guess here?
I'd have to go back and look it up, but that was also taken in Oconee Hill Cemetery. There's just some really, beautiful and fascinating statuary in that place. So I love to do photography there.
I'm kind of seeing an angel taking the baby up, so I would assume it was a child's grave, but maybe not.
Yeah,
Okay.
it very well could be.
And you were saying that you're collecting stories. What do you think? You'll do another book on Northern Georgia, or what's the plan?
I think it's going to have to be, stories from the Southeast or something, because, I just seem to keep getting stories from further and further out, and if it's a good story, I want to get it in there. So I'm not going to rule anything out.
So got to ask, are you ready to go on another ghost hunt?
Maybe. Yeah, it was scary. And, I never really intended to do that. And I actually, when I went on that one, it was not by design. I had talked to Oconee Tourism and agreed to help them, with filming this project, and I was just going to, do an interview with them. And so, my friend Jeff Clark, he was involved in this as well, and he told me that the person who was going to be filming our segments was going to be at the Eagle Tavern when, filming this investigation they were doing. And so I just kind of stopped by. I wanted to meet him, and just, say hello and touch base before we actually had to start filming. And he's like, oh, do you want to join the investigative group? And I thought, okay.
I think you're doing yourself an injustice by not being there. I really do. You've written so well, but not being there. I just think your added touch would just, now this is what happened to me, would tip it off even better.
Yeah, it definitely changes, the tone of the story and the perspective and everything. But, I don't want to be scared out of my wits on a regular basis.
All right. Well, Tracy Adkins, you are the author of, and let me run through these things one more time: Ghosts of Asheville, which will be out in about a week and a half; The Ghost of Athens; and Ghosts of Athens and Beyond. All available on Amazon.
Yes.
All right. And I believe you do a lot of traveling and doing book signings, and you do lectures.
Yeah, I do different author events and do some classes and things around. And anyone that's interested in that can go on Facebook to Tracy L. Adkins author. And that's got all of the information about book releases and different appearances and events and things.
All right. Well, Tracy, thanks for giving me a little bit of time today, because your stories are incredible and your writing style is amazing. So I hope people will pick it up.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me here.
Well, Tracy, take care. And if you get some good stories, let me know, because I want to bring you back.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care now.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, friends, that's Northern Georgia. I've hit West Virginia, a lot of other places, and of course, Missouri, Kansas, Arkansas, Illinois. There is so much haunted stuff, and we're coming into the season now. And a lot of these folks, a lot of people don't realize there's a ghost tour right down the road in Athens, or there's a ghost tour we know there's a bunch of ghost tours in Asheville, but a lot of these towns have them. We've got one in a little town called Pilot Mountain right close to me. And of course, Mount Airy has ghost tours. Lots of little towns have them. If you're looking for something to do for the season, this is it. Just check it out. Type in ghost hunts, your area, and check some of these people out, because the history and the ghost tours and the stories, you'll love it. Speaking of which, the X-Con is coming up so quickly, October 30th to November 1st. If you saw the show I did last night, I talked to two of our guests. One of them, if you are into government conspiracies and giants and UFOs, this is the man to listen to. And I also spoke to our resident astrologer who was bringing in using astrology and UFOs, astrology and ghost hunts. We've been communicating since then, and she's been wanting to get more information on days and times and locations where I had the most experiences and matching it up to the astrology at the time. So that's just two of the speakers. We got folks from the Bradshaw Ranch, which makes Skinwalker Ranch look like Dallas. I mean, there's nothing spooky compared to the Bradshaw Ranch. We've got Ramsey talking about ancient mysteries. We've got Scott Walter talking about the Templars and their alien connection. We're at the Oasis Hotel. There's going to be a costume ball on the 31st. Man, this has got everything. And because we kind of had some issues with the hotel and had to change locations, Margie's offering a buy one, get one till the end of this month. Jump in. This is your time. This is some of the best people in the paranormal, and they're coming to tell you their stories. I'm going to have some great evidence. In fact, if you get the chance, I'll be on Margie's show. You probably by the time you see this, I'll already be on there, but it'll be available. And I'm going to show just a little bit of the evidence I've got to show at the main conference. So if you're interested, come on over, check it out. And if you're not an UnX subscriber, what is wrong with you? It's free. All you got to do is put your name on the list. First page of our unxnetwork.com. Go down a little bit, type in your email address, and what do you get for all that work? Guys, you get the magazine, an electrical copy sent to your email every month with some amazing stories in it. Got one on a possible Jack the Ripper, who Jack the Ripper may really have been. And as it happens, he was living in St. Louis a lot at that time, though he was in Whitechapel at the time of the murders. The haunted battleship North Carolina, time travel, UFOs, Bigfoot, weird stuff. And it's all free just for putting your name down. So, guys, join up. You even get discounts for the XCon. It's all covered here. And all you got to do is become a member. All right. Well, we've had a great time with Tracy with some really amazing stories. XCon is coming up. Join the club. Stay spooked, and good night.